We're here with a special guest, Fred Schenkelberg from Accendo Reliability. Glad to have you here, Fred. Glad you
Well,
could make
thanks for
it.
the invite, you guys, and no pressure, with that intro. I manage a website that's hosted on Rainmaker called Accendo Reliability, as my Italian friends remind me, the
Chen,
Accendo, not Accendo.
that's
And
right. We were just talking about the Italian. Yep.
yeah, and it, it's built on my experience and background as a reliability engineer and consultant. I've been that for like 20 years or something like that. I've been in digital for since I was Hewlett Packard, and we had an intranet that we did webinars and we had email lists and all that kind of good stuff, and had to code sites internally on our servers with raw HTML. There's no such thing as CSS, at least in our system. So,
Yeah.
I
so I've
remember
been at
those
it.
days
Yeah, I went go keeps your site simple. There's no doubt about it.
for
So
sure.
I've been at it for a while, and I think Shendo has been up for, if I remember right, 10 or 12 years, something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, as you mentioned, you've been working with websites for a really long time. Today, we're talking about websites, but specifically the importance of digital ownership. Not just renting space through social media, but actually having a digital home where your content lives, where your audience can find you. And as you mentioned, you've been doing this since the HP days when you were working there. You're an expert on this. So you mentioned you're a reliability engineer. You mentioned that you have action. Sorry, you're gonna have to help me with the pronunciation on that
Oh,
again.
either way works.
Shindo.
Just don't call
Accendo.
me late for dinner. Yeah,
Fair enough.
Shendo.
But yeah, so how did you actually get started with this site? How did you transition, and then how did you transition that online?
Uh, well, when I was at Hewlett Packard, before I was a consultant, so this goes back 25, 30 years ago, and that were original internal webinars and stuff. Um, we were in a group, at a corporate group of engineers that basically had to, we called it tin cupping. We had to get the divisions to pony up money for us to work on a project for them. So we were captured consultants. This is one way we were described. And what I found is that if I had an email list and actually answered questions for the couple thousand engineers that were on the list across the company, not always about reliability, but just mostly engineering type questions. If I get 100 of those a week, I get 10 follow-ups and more detailed discussions. And then one of those would give us a $500,000 contract, and then we'd
I
go
didn't just
off to
send
work.
emails like that.
Well, it wasn't,
Yeah, no
and
kidding.
it wasn't a newsletter. It was and I meant to look up the name of this email service. It's still around, but anybody on the list can send a message out. There's no filter to it. And on an intranet, we didn't worry about IP or stuff like that. And so I would moderate that to make sure people got answers. And if they didn't get an answer right away from the handful of folks I thought would know the answer, I'd ping them and track down an answer for them. But what I learned is that you can't give away what you know. It's just not possible. And we were writing articles, we're doing webinars, we're answering questions. I had loads and loads of content that we did. And we had frequently asked questions, things, and yet it was the engagement, that the willingness to get an answer to somebody, to ask them how it worked out and follow up with them and build the reputation that you were going to help them. And
Fred, one of the things that I find, and I'd be interested in your thoughts on this, uh, so many consultants want to get paid before they answer the question, but so many customers, we say, well, how do I know that you can help me? And so to the example you just shared, I encourage my entire team, answer the question. And if we answer the question, we establish value. We call it authority and authenticity.
mm-hmm.
And is that what, I mean, I'm not sure what kind of questions you were getting, but if that was that the strategy? I mean, not to turn it into marketing, but was that kind of the thinking? Is it if you could prove that you guys were worthwhile, then they would come back to you?
Internal at HB, that was the deliberate strategy, but it just became internalized for me. And later I learned it was called content marketing. Like, I didn't know what it was
Yeah.
that, but
I mean,
I told you the story the other day, David. I was at a conference and this
yeah,
woman
I
comes
was going to
up.
ask you to tell that story. Yep.
Yeah. And I'm working at the conference. I'm part of the, check-in counter kind of crew. And this woman comes up and asks, and it was slow. And she asked me a question about accelerated life testing, which she said, somebody said, you know a lot about that, so I should talk to you. And she described her problem. I pulled out a piece of paper. I wrote down, here's the way to think about it. Here's a good reference for you. I think he's here somewhere. Go over there, talk to him, you know. And I completely forgot about it. And about 2 weeks later, she called me back and said, are you available to consult on this project? And I didn't remember at all from the conference. It's just what I do. I just go answer questions. And sometimes it pissed off my coworkers and friends that were trying to land a contract. But she ended up being one of my best clients ever. I mean, we wrote some technical papers together. We've solved a bunch of problems for them in their company. And it really established her as an expert in her own company because of the work that was coming out of it. And I asked her once at lunch, so why did you call me to do this consulting gig? And says, well, obviously you don't remember, but I asked you a question at the conference and you gave me enough information that I could maybe go do it. But timelines and stuff like that would be easier if you were with me. All the other consultants I talked to, within their first or second question was, how much money do you have?
Mm-hmm.
And it was a 2-minute discussion. It would cost me more to bill her than it was worth.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm always
Good.
surprised. I didn't mean to jump on your comment there, but I'm always surprised how easy it is to say that my time is valuable, my bill rate, when in reality, time has no value until you establish that you have value. And when David was sharing some of this with me, it was like, I don't know how we teach people to think as that customer and really bring them the value. So that's just amazing to me. I mean, that
it takes a little bit of trust. And I've run into people I talk to that, want to become consultants or our consultants are looking for work and says, well, how many emails do you get a day that you answer the question? You don't write a proposal, you answer the question. Oh, I never do that. It's like you said, Ed, my time's valuable. I says, it goes back to know, like, and trust. They need to know who you are, so a blog or on LinkedIn and being active in public forums and other stuff helps become visible. But if you are only doing sales pitches for a knowledge worker, they don't know how you're thinking. But
Yep.
write a blog post about how to approach doing a particular method or activity or skill or whatever. You're demonstrating you know what you're talking about, and you build trust. And then you answer questions, and then they come back to you, and then they send you money.
Yeah, you mentioned in our conversation that actually the reason Accendo exists is because of some of that frustration with the way that some of your colleagues, the trade journals, the trade associations were doing that, where they would only do their own thing, their own events, their own people, and weren't actually thinking about giving value to the audience. Can you talk a little bit about that and kind of how
Oh,
that
sure.
started?
I was the president or chair, I remember what the title was, of the American Society for Quality or of Quality, I don't remember. But we had a professional society division, basically, and we had, I don't know, 3,000 members in that group, and we're all volunteers. And the idea was the charter of the overall professional societies, provide valuable insights or opportunities or content or whatever for your members. And they had one course in our field and it sucked. It needed serious update. It was horrible. So I knew of other courses from all kinds of people across industry that really did a good job. And I said, the society had an internal calendar, and we could post stuff and tag it as reliability stuff. And I put a bunch of stuff up there, and I got hate mail from them saying, no, you can't advertise stuff that doesn't come to us. And I said, well, what's the point
Wow.
of servicing your customers if we only have one thing and it's terrible? And no, that's the rule. So I went to Google, opened up a calendar, put it on my own little website, and called it a reliability engineering calendar. And at one point we had, I don't know, 20 people contributing it from different organizations and different training organizations and different societies, all kinds of people. And it found out, and I still manage it and run it. And they said, how did you do that? Well, I went to Google. And then another one was, we wanted to do a webinar. We thought that would be a great way to engage our membership and bring expertise to them other than articles. And they were using, I don't know what system it was, but it came with an 800 number, and it was $1 per minute per user.
Oh gosh, I remember, like WebEx or something.
Yeah,
Right?
it was WebEx. And
Yeah.
they said, you have to use it. And I says, we want to do this for free. We got volunteers coming in to talk to them, and they don't have, we're not going to charge $100 for one of these per person. What's the point of having dues and being a member of the thing? And so we arm twisted somebody else that had I think it was a Zoom account, or it might have been a GoToMeeting account, and said, hey, on Tuesday, can we borrow it for an hour? Yeah, sure. We had 500 people in our first webinar.
Oh my goodness.
And
Wow.
then
That's amazing.
And then that year, we were the only division out of, I don't know, 20 divisions and all these other groups in the professional society that we were #1 in retention. We retained our members at a higher percentage than anybody else, and we grew. We were one of only 2 groups that grew, and we grew the most. And then they come back to me, the corporate folks are all like, well, how did you do that? Well, I said, I ignored you and your rules. I just did it.
Now, David, don't listen to him.
Yeah, exactly.
That's when
Well,
we started our own site, and we had a calendar. We had, based not advertisement, a listing of here's universities, here's other content, here's other people doing it. And then that then grew into Accendo, where it was the frustration not only with professional societies or trade magazines, which were just, blankets for advertising. We tried to do something right down the middle of it. You didn't have to pay dues, and you didn't have to wade through the ads. And there was a handful of consultants at a conference. We were sitting down in the hallway and chatting, and each of us had a blog, and absolutely invisible for search engines. It was just out there, but it was only one new piece of content a week. It was pretty impossible to be seen. And so the 4 of us said, well, let's all put it together on one site, so we have a regular feed of new content on a regular daily basis. And currently our site, we started with this 4 of us doing a blog, 1 day a week. And now we have over 70 contributors. We have about 10 to 12 articles per week. We have 6 to 8 episodes per week, a couple of webinars, a bunch of other stuff that goes on it. And our traffic and everything else blows away the old site at my professional society and the trade magazines.
It is. That's awesome. I mean, you were early to the party, I think, on the importance of content marketing as a discipline, and then building that site, right, to be able to have a central repository, central library where you're providing value to an audience. That, I think, I mean, when did you start that? What year did you guys put your heads together on the site there?
I think it was 2006, 2008, somewhere in that time frame, when I was frustrated with the professional society and its limitations. And yeah, I could get an article, once every 6 months into a trade journal, but it was, if it was, it only got published if it was related to the ads they could put next to it. I'm like, I'm not advertising these guys. And so I started on my own site. I had a small ISP near where I live that had a WordPress capability. So I stuck it on there. And it started to grow, and I needed more capability, more space, and all that other stuff. So it came to Rainmaker. but having it there versus up on a professional site or on a trade magazine, this stuff's all evergreen. And the trade magazine, you had to wade through all the ads, so it's not free. And then they started putting their articles behind a paywall. You had to give them their email before you could even see it, which limited its search reach. Nobody could find it unless you were inside their system. The professional societies, you have to be a member before you get access to any of that. You pay up front for an annual fee, and then you maybe, and then again, you can't find it in search engines. So I knew that I wanted it to be public and free. And the strategy, the business plan, which I got asked for over and over again by people that were thinking about contributing or participating in it, and some never came back after I explained it to them, is you give away good content. You make it so that they come back. This is the place people want to go find information, and they trust it because it's not slanted for this product or that product or any of those other things. And so that's what worked. And having it on our own site, I could call the role. I could call the shots. I could say, it's not my product. It's not one of our people's contributors' products, but it's a good product. Let's share it. Let's make it available. Whereas I ran into way too many limitations and constraints with the other outlets that were available, including social media. I think about the time I got the site up and running is when Facebook said, no, you can't really talk to all the people that signed up to follow you.
Yep.
And I'm like, well, what's the point?
Well, and that, in my opinion, is one of the truly unique things about digital media content marketing is, for those of us of a certain generation that wrote articles, whether they be for entertainment or academic reasons, there was always a judge, and that judge dictated, the editor, somebody was dictating what got published and what didn't get published, and there was always a business motivation behind that. And then you look at rented media or social media today, there are algorithms. I mean, we like to mystify it, but the fact of the matter is it's still a business. And when you own your digital presence, whether it be complex like yours or very simple, the fact of the matter is, as you said, you're the boss. You call the shots. At the end of the day, if you're wrong, you go, well, that didn't work. Let's try something else. And if it did work, then you can move forward. And I think so few people are willing to embrace or recognize that only through digital ownership are you free to fly, or free to be to grow. We talk to people all the time on the social media side that say, oh, I've got 1 million followers on fill in the blank, and I'm selling fill in the blank. And then 6 months later, they're calling us up and they're saying, yeah, I lost my followers and I'm not selling anything. Can you get my followers back? Well, no.
No. No, it's when I first started consulting on my own, I started my own, I think it's called a brochure site,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I already had what I would call a digital resume or a Google resume. That coupled with a unique spelled name so that it's easy to find.
Sure.
A colleague of mine is named Nancy Reagan, and you just can't find her if you search for Nancy Reagan. So if you name your business, don't name it something it's a common thing everybody else does. Yeah, Google your own idea before you check it, kind of thing.
Oh yeah.
And
great idea.
And so what we did is we had a very simple website, and right away it was gather the emails, because when I was in HP, I had a big email list that I could tap into and ask questions to and do all kinds of stuff. And I knew I still wanted to do that. And so I immediately started collecting business cards and asking people to join the list. And I had blog I was writing, and people sign up for the blogs on a regular basis and then a newsletter. And so that just evolved to the list I got now. And it's not the total end game. It's not it's always based on permission. You know, I had one person, oh, you don't have enough subscribers. You should buy this list over here. And like, no, no, you don't want to be doing that.
Yeah.
And so it's one aspect of it. But I can do my own promotions. I can set it up. The logos and the branding is the way I want it to be. Yeah, it gives me a playground, which is a little bit too dangerous sometimes to go mess with it. I think one leg up I had is I've been messing with computers since they were on a tape drive output and a punch card input, old kits in the 70s. So I'm not afraid of computers. And I always, sometimes I'll stay up all night because I know it can be done one way or the other. But there's so much support out there. There's so much help out there. And some of this, the hosting sites and the support teams that are available are just make it a lot easier to do. You don't need a staff of IT professionals to have a website. You don't.
Yeah.
But having it is, if that shows up number one when somebody searches for you, then you've got a good, that's the reason to have it. You then control you don't control the discussion. That's not the right term. You can start.
But you can guide it. You can start the discussion.
Start the discussion. But if it's, LinkedIn does a nice, resume kind of format on your homepage, but that site's really aimed at helping people find jobs, not much else. And so I don't have an email list generator there. They recently added a newsletter feature, so I tapped into that. But
and how are you finding that? We use the LinkedIn newsletter and have had some success. What are you seeing?
I started it, I don't know, a year ago, maybe something like that. And within a month, I had 6,000 subscribers.
Oh, okay. Quit showing off. That's amazing.
But I also had 15,000 connections, already. But it reaffirmed, and it's the only reason I was on LinkedIn and thought about the newsletters. That's where my customers are. I've been on, I think I always tried something on Twitch. I tried Instagram. There's not a lot of good pictures of people sitting there doing statistics. just not. It doesn't, it doesn't matter how much chocolate topping you put on it. It's just still somebody at a computer. But I've tried over the years, I don't know, all kinds of weird. Vine for a while was out there. I tried a few things there and stuff, and it's crickets. And I look at the Google Analytics where stuff's coming from and everything else. And I've been pretty consistently 10 to 15% of traffic comes from LinkedIn and more. Sunday used to be an absolute dead day on the site. And then I started a newsletter and publishing it out on LinkedIn. And it's a spike day now. Not always, but every now and then I get a huge spike.
So that newsletter's going out on what day?
Sunday.
Oh, so that day. So you're not getting long. It is that day people are opening it and reading it immediately.
Yeah. And Monday gets a little bit of a bump too. But and if I'm late, I get an email saying, are you okay? Are you going to send the newsletter today? So I know it's looked for. But the LinkedIn seems to be where my audience is. And I tried looking for them all kinds of places. But so that's the role I use. The newsletter on LinkedIn and follow up the promo pieces and stuff for articles. But once you get to the site, there's a sidebar that says, hey, sign up for the newsletter, stuff like that. Yeah, not everybody does, but the folks that have been there 3-4 times, they, I wanted to stay in touch here.
Well, and speaking of your audience, we had an interesting discussion yesterday about who your audience is. You mentioned that most of your content that actually that drives your traffic is more like 101 or 201 level stuff. And despite the fact that you and your contributors are all expert in the field, and you also mentioned that you actually have pretty good penetration among younger engineers, despite not being on quote unquote younger focused platforms. Can you talk a little bit about the thing that you said that kind of stuck in my mind is the stuff that gets views is the stuff people are embarrassed to go ask their boss about. Can you talk a little about your like content philosophy there and how you're reaching that audience?
Well, I I think some of this comes from ProBlogger, from I think it's
Mhm.
Darren is the guy.
Darren Rouse.
Yeah, and it was, if you're looking for ideas of what to write about, you got to write about stuff that you already forgot, because
Huh.
I just use that inherently, right? I don't even think about it. And I was talking to a potential new contributor to the site this morning, and they were talking about, just the beyond PhD level applications of weird stuff, and I have a hard time keeping up with them. And then he
Mhm.
asked me pretty much what you asked, David, is, what works on your site? And so I said, I wrote a very basic, simple tutorial of how to do a very basic kind of charting thing, like how to do a bar chart and why would you use it, kind of thing.
Mm.
Absolutely 500 words, dirt simple, 2 graphs in it. And I think the one I was thinking of is something called control charts. It's a fundamental skill, just basic. It's in every book. It's in every magazine. It's been published since the 1920s. I wrote it 8 years ago. It still gets 200-300 visits a day.
Oh my gosh.
And I like it's in the number. It's in the number in the top 5 most frequently visited posts week after week after week after week. And it's dirt simple. And so I was telling this guy, it's like, you're building on a whole career of knowledge and schooling and education and practice and everything else. And yeah, what you're writing about is interesting and informative and cutting edge and all this other cool stuff. But you started from scratch and you had mentors and books and podcasts or whatever it was that you got your education. Well, return that favor, send it back to other people. What Darren at ProBlogger said is about 80% of your content should be really aimed at the people just starting. And then the rest can be the higher level, as you would say, David, the 301, 401 type stuff. But the idea is that people don't go to Google to find a PhD thesis. They go to Google Scholar, or they call their buddy at the university and go get
Yep.
it, or they
Yep.
write it themselves if they've got enough funding. Whereas if I'm sitting there and I like, what was the 4th step in this process? It's
Mhm.
quicker to Google it than it is to go find the book or ask somebody.
Huh.
And so
That's a good insight.
so I find, and I've done a handful of surveys through like some survey service, and it's kind of demographics of who's the audience, where they work, kind of stuff. And it's well over half, probably 60-70% were in the industry for less than 2 years.
Wow.
And that snapshot, 2 snapshots I did. So it's a lot of people that, and in my field, most reliability professionals get tapped on the shoulder and says, "Hey, Ed, you're the new reliability person. Go
Woohoo!
figure it out."
Yep.
Oh.
I got tapped like that. And it says, "Does that come with a pay raise?" "Oh no. If you screw up, we'll yell at you." But it's what I didn't find, unless you join a professional society and they dribbed and drabbed stuff out to you. And the trade magazines, there's always this bias of buy the newest widget, whiz bang, cool thing, and it'll solve all your problems, which it won't. And so somebody writing tutorials and basics is what got us started. And it's every week, it's the top 10 articles are almost 9 out of 10 are basics. And so
That's
that's
awesome.
where the traffic comes from. And then my strategy, my evil plan, is if they trust the site, they get good information to start with, then they'll come back with better questions. They'll come back with, "Hey, I need an expert on this to look over my shoulder. I need coaching. I need something else." Or they come back and say, "I've been consuming from this site for 10 years. I want to contribute and share my knowledge and my journey and stuff like that." So to me, it becomes a virtuous circle where people come back to the site and there's traffic there and people are asking good questions and they're looking for information, and then contributors want to serve that market. So that's what the platform's about, is that more voices, many voices can talk about control charts or dot plots or whatever. And the more people that are there, the more content and opportunities to be found are. And so
For
it
sure.
works all the way around.
If you were giving advice to somebody who was just starting from scratch, I mean, you did this all the way back from, you know, intranet before internet, coming to now and the tools that are at hand and how audiences are engaging. If you were to tell somebody starting today, what would you tell them to do?
Um, it's not that much different than early on. I wouldn't have called it create a Google resume back then because Google wasn't around, but it's your own website. You're sharing your knowledge, whether it's articles or podcasts or webinars or whatever content that's relevant for sharing what you know. Um, in addition, get involved with conferences and present papers or tutorials. Get involved with local chapters that have evening meetings, and more of them are doing them remote. So you could do one every week if you wanted to, because you don't have to be there. And they publish that stuff on their websites, which are visible. And so when you Google a person's name, if it shows 4 or 5 pages of presentations and conference papers and all this activity they've been doing and all these articles that you got your byline on it, that just adds a whole tremendous amount of credibility that, yeah, they know this stuff. They might not be the top best known influencer, but they're on their way. And so to get started, whether or not you're a reliability or a consultant or not, is even in industry, is write a blog, do a podcast. There was one blog or podcaster that was famous because he didn't know the answer. He wasn't the expert, but he was always asking questions and taking his audience along with his learning journey as he learned. I think it was marketing or something like that he was talking about. That's okay. You can do it. The other piece of advice is everything you do online is there forever, or as long as the Wayback Machine keeps working, and we can say that.
Yeah, for good or ill.
For good or ill, but if you have a flame war with somebody just because, that's still on your record. And so be cautious and be helpful, considerate, honest, answer the questions. If you don't know the answer, say, I don't know the answer. Maybe somebody else does. But create a digital record or Google profile, as I call it, that reinforces what's on your resume. Somebody just getting started is be visible and be able to ask questions and answer questions if you can, and so on. Be helpful, demonstrate it. And then second part is there's a lot of good resources out there. So network, and part of it, Accendo is to enable that networking. So if you really like the way Bill writes his articles, his contact info is there. Send him a note, leave a comment, get involved with that, and build those connections so that you know who to call when you're really crunched. Although I did have one person call me once and goes, Fred, it's really important. I have to do this analysis for tomorrow and they're not going to like the answers. What do I do? And I'll leave you to think about what you'd like to do to answer that one. But the idea is that don't be shy. It probably sums it up, is you've got knowledge to share. You're asking questions, which is good. You're learning, which is good. And then build your network out. And today it's so easy to do online.
Well, and as you mentioned, starting with ownership of that platform, ownership of your content, where you're the one starting the conversation, setting the tone, is such a big deal. So
even
that's,
if you don't know. I mean,
yeah,
I love the asking of questions. I mean, nothing is more powerful than you asking, hey, you're the expert, can you teach me? That's a very powerful sales technique. And certainly when it comes from a place of trust or a place of honesty, it's that strategy never changes, whether you're online, offline, or in any other part of your life.
Yep.
yep. Well, thanks for that, Fred. I mean, this has been a really good discussion. I think we've had some really meaty points here to share with our audience. We're gonna have to wrap this up because time is short, time is fleeting. But thank you, Ed, for co-hosting with me today. Cheers.
Thank you. Thank you
And
so much.
and Fred, thank you for giving us of your time and being here to share your knowledge with us.
Yeah, it's a pleasure.
So that's all we have today for this dispatch discussion. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch you next time. It's been David Brandon signing off.
You watch too
Perfect.
many TV shows.
Way too many. Way too many.